Hello, I'm Andrea Goodman. In this installment of Talking Choral Music, my guest is Nolan Gasser, who is a true Renaissance man. He is a critically acclaimed composer, pianist, author, and musicologist, most notably the architect of Pandora Radio's Music Genome Project. His principal works include the musical Benny and June, the opera Secret Garden, and the orchestral tone poem Cosmic Reflection. He is the author of Why You Like It, The Science and Culture of Musical Taste, and lectures regularly on a wide range of musical topics. He joins us today from Sonoma County, California. Welcome, Nolan.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. You had a special interest in the sacred polyphony of the Italian Renaissance composers. Why them? Was it because you love to sing the music, or what about it attracted you to that particular kind of music?
Right. So, I mean, it's definitely a bit of a tale. So, just to back up even further, before we first met, um, as I mentioned, I spent some time in Paris. So I'm from Southern California, and I've always been a pianist, and playing jazz and classically trained as well. And I got an undergrad at Cal State Northridge in piano and composition. And then I ended up with a good friend of mine, selling all of our belongings and moving to Paris, doing that sort of expatriate, wild time in my early 20s. And I studied
Why not?
composition there. Yeah, it was definitely a good time. So I was 24, between 24 and 26 that I was there. And so I studied composition with a composer named Betsy Jolas, who had been an assistant of Messiaen, obviously, with a rich tradition, including of choral music there, and studied at Fontainebleau. But when I was in Paris, it was sort of one day in Paris, I went to the Fnac, which is like the sort of, Best Buy in France. And this was 1988, so CDs were not brand new, but still somewhat, fresh. And I was going through the bins, and I stumbled upon a CD, uh, which was recorded by Sir Edward Higginbottom and the New College Oxford Choir.
Right. Mhm.
And it was a recording on the Meridian label of the 5 and 6 part motets of Josquin des Prés. Now, I had, as an undergrad, I had taken early music history, so I knew the name of Josquin, and I remembered I kind of liked him, but I just sort of picked it up just as something interesting to listen to. And that CD really ended up kind of rocking my world. The very first motet, it's a 5 part motet called Inviolata. Most of the motets are in honor of the Virgin Mary, which was, interesting for a nice Jewish boy to get so passionate about that. Um, and it just, like I said, it kind of rocked my world. I ended up just listening to that entire CD. It had the Stabat Mater. It had, I think, perhaps one of the greatest pieces ever written, which is Preterrerum Serium, 6 part motet. So for this, piano playing, contemporary composer, uh, falling deeply in love with this, a cappella choral music from the Renaissance, it was definitely an unexpected turn. But I was so deeply moved by this music, and so just inspired by it, and captivated, that I really needed to figure out what was going on, what was the praxis of this music, because being a composer and all that, music sort of starts with Bach, right? And this is obviously a very different orientation. It's not tonal, it's modal, and I just didn't have the tools to understand what was going on.
So
And
clearly you're
so,
still
yeah.
composing today. So do you find that this influences your music even to this day with things you can work on, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So I continue to write for choir. I've written quite a few choral works, including works with other instruments. I've written an oratorio called American Festivals for orchestra, soloists, and chorus, which has gotten sort of several performances. And I've written other more chamber pieces with choir and soloists and that thing, and that sort
And
of.
you're commissioned from the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. That's no slouch.
Yes,
Tell us about that.
exactly. Yeah, no, I've been very fortunate to get some great commissions, and I've written a number of a cappella works, including settings of Latin, poets like Horace. Um, and there's a technique that I've used in many pieces, both instrumental and choral, which is sort of based on the mensuration canon. If you remember that one of obviously the teachers of Josquin is Johannes Ockeghem, and he actually wrote this Missa Prolationem, right, which is sort of
Sure.
a mensuration canon. And so I've sort of adapted, not writing in mensurations, but using different sort of temporal, different tactus, 4 different tactus at once, which I think is a really fun technique to write contrapuntally.
Do your singers find it fun, or is it scratching their
Actually,
heads?
it's definitely they have to kind of get in their own world. It's like
Right.
because both Ockeghem and Josquin ended up writing that sort of mensuration canon in the Missa L'Homme. Um, you have to kind of almost a little bit shut out the other
Yes.
voices in terms of where's one.
Say, don't listen to your fellow singers. Don't listen to them.
But what it does is you have basically these, canonic melodies, much like you have in any other kind of, canon-based or fugue-based approach. But again, they're just in different sort of temporal worlds. And it just for the ear, it just, I think is a really lovely place to get lost in. So yes, so that that sort of approach, and just generally a contrapuntal style where the voices are equal. That's one of the reasons that the high renaissance of Josquin and Comper and Brumel and all those composers is, for me, a sort of a pinnacle is it really was this democracy of voices where each voice is equally. It's not just the soprano voice that guides the sort of narrative. It's all the voices.
So was it through Stanford that you met the people who became involved in Pandora Radio? Can you take us over to that, how that happened? Because that's really unbelievable. I still don't know or understand. Maybe you could help us, and how that works and how it affects choral musicians. And now all of a sudden we had a radio station that would play just the stuff that we wanted. And you are the guy who figured that out, I guess.
Yeah,
So
I'm
please
sort
give
of
us a few tips on how that worked, and
yeah,
how you found
absolutely.
that.
I think it's another example of the kind of the circuitous path that our careers can take. And hopefully it all makes sense in the end. So I was toward the end of my doctoral program. I focused in on, specifically for my dissertation, very much involved with choral music. It was the relationship between sacred polyphony and veneration of the Virgin Mary in Renaissance Milan. Right, so very, obviously, as all dissertations are, pretty narrow, but there's composers, many of your listeners here will know the theorist, Francinus Gaffurius, who was the maestro di cappella at the cathedral in Milan. So he's known as a theorist, but he was also an active composer. And in the course of my studies and working in Milan, I actually I was able to attribute a number of motets to him, as well as I transcribed a bunch of interesting choral works written at the Duomo in the Ambrosian style. So I don't know that these works, they are transcribed and they're available in my dissertation. I don't know that they've actually ever been recorded. I planned on doing it, but I haven't. So that's interesting opportunity. I know this is not getting to your question yet, but some of this music is very interesting, typical of the Ambrosian style. There are parallel sevenths, there are parallel seconds, just interesting stuff occasionally at any rate. So that was my path. I started applying for academic positions with an emphasis on choral repertoire and early music notation. And then I got an email from a guy named Tim Westergren, who had been a Stanford grad and who had heard about me being kind of an eclectic musician. And he had just, with two other people, had started a company, a music technology company. It was called Savage Beast Technologies.
Mm-hmm.
This was 1999. And the idea was to sort of analyze music, use a database, approach, an algorithmic approach, sort of machine learning, but based on an analysis, a coding of music, to be able to make better recommendations than, say, Amazon could in their technique, which is known as collaborative filtering. And so I didn't know anything about music technology. I didn't know anything about even working in a business. But it seemed like a good opportunity. And so I kind of said, okay, maybe I'm not going to become an academic. And I ended up sort of running the whole music operation for this company. And I'm the architect of what became the Music Genome Project. And it really is so I took it under, my direction. In fact, I was in Milan working on my dissertation during the day, and at night was, working on what this genome could be. And so it basically is a very detailed music analysis approach where each factor my approach was to break all of the musical parameters. So you have melody, harmony, rhythm, form, sound, as well as things like genre and, of course, text, breaking them down into individual factors that could be quantified objectively. And then we hired a whole team of trained musicians, put on headphones, and we started with pop and rock music, not surprisingly, because that's where the money was, and would score these 300 to 400 individual genes on a particularly specific scale. And that information is how Pandora makes recommendations. So when you say that you like, Andrea Bocelli, and the particular song, Conte Partiro, it will find other music that, matches that genomically, either holistically or based on individual aspects. Basically, every single piece of music that is in the Pandora, database or catalog, which is pretty much everything, is actually hand coded by a trained musician. So you're a fan of Eric Whitacre. So all of his pieces, or most of his pieces, have actually been analyzed across all of these parameters. Again, that's the classical genome, which is it was the last genome to be designed. But it's the most sophisticated, not surprising, because it needs to be able to code everything from Leonan and Perotin, or even Gregorian chant, to music written last Tuesday. And so everything, in terms of the melodic identity, the harmonic identity, so the use of clusters, is a diatonic, what is the level of dissonance, are there use of harmonic patterns, all of the nuanced musicological information, and then rhythmic information, formal information, obviously the instrumentation. So if it's a cappella, that would be one dimension. And so, again, according to 400, or actually in the case of the classical genome, over 500 individual genes are quantified.
So this is still ongoing. They still plug in more new pieces or more old pieces all the time, and it just keeps going and going and going. So
I really encourage anyone listening who has an ensemble that has a recording. It actually doesn't need to even be on a label. It just needs to have, sort of be well recorded, because the criteria is on sort of audio quality and fidelity. But if they have a recording of music of anything, Mozart or Palestrina or whatever it may be, they can submit it to Pandora, and so long as it passes that sort of hurdle, it will get analyzed and it will go in, and then they can tell all of their fans to create a station for their ensemble. And they'll actually, and then if they sign up to a to an entity called Sound Exchange. Sound Exchange is kind of the money arm of the RIAA, which is the record industry. They will actually get paid. I have a few albums that get played on Pandora. They're piano albums, and then some a jazz ensemble and some other things. I actually get, it's not enough to retire on by any means, but it's sort of reasonable amount of money to get paid. And if you get your fan base to spread the word and create a station, you'll make some money. And then finally in 2004, we were able to raise enough money, to launch a business to consumer, a B2C business, where we could actually present the findings of the Music Genome Project directly to listeners. I mean, I knew that was the key to its success, and we were finally able to make it happen. And so we had now Pandora Radio, but how do you get it out? How do you tell people about it so they subscribe, so they can sign up and use it? And then literally, the answer to our prayers was a year later when the iPhone came out. So 2005 is when the iPhone came out. And if you remember, everybody wanted to know what's the latest app. And so Pandora was able to quickly build an app for the iPhone. And that's why everybody knows Pandora, because between 2005 and maybe 2010 or 11, if you wanted to hear music on your iPhone, you'd use Pandora. Then later Spotify and others came in and actually were smart about things that Pandora was a little bit behind the curve on in terms of making on-demand music. Now you can do that on Pandora. But so on the iPhone, on the iPad, on the watch, any device, and then just to finish that thought, now Pandora does have something called Pandora Premium. So it is the same price as Spotify. It's like maybe $7.99 a month or something like that, or maybe it's a little bit less. And then you can not only create stations, but you can say, I want to listen, to the entire Mozart Requiem right now, and I want to listen to it 3 times in a row. And you can do that. Up until about a year and a half ago, you couldn't. You could do that on Spotify. But you actually don't need to pay anything if you just want the standard Pandora radio service. That's still free.
Wow, that's really great. Well, let's jump forward a little bit, or a lot, let's say, and tell us, I reconnected with you because I heard an interview on our local radio station here in Lenox, Massachusetts, about your book. So your book is called Why You Like It, The Science and Culture of Musical Taste. Can it help choral musicians understand why they love this music so much in the first place?
Well,
what kind of content would interest them? Because I always thought that our musical tastes are associated with whatever was happening when we first heard a piece of music. What does its association have with what was going on at that very moment? And, your first kiss or something, whatever was playing in the background, and that becomes your favorite music. And then we have this window in our 20s or something. And the minute we hit 30, we no longer open our brains to new sounds, new ideas, new composers. But anyway, you're the expert. So why don't you give me an idea how it works, or give us an idea?
Well, we're all, the good news is that all of us are wired to love music. We're all wired to understand musical discourse, and for us to understand the importance of music in our lives. We really are musical beings. And as one of the things that I argue in the book is we really did evolve in a way where even if music didn't help us to become human, our musicality did. Basically, the story behind the book, and I've got it here, right? So
good, thank you for showing us.
Yeah, Why You Like It, The Science and Culture of Musical Taste. It's on Macmillan.
And that's going to be in our show notes, so nobody has to search for it. It'll be right there underneath the description of the show, plus Nolan's website and more. So, okay, so tell us.
Yeah, so obviously, with the success of Pandora and the Music Genome Project being a technology that people actually have heard of, which is kind of rare, I got, I got a little bit of celebrity as a genome architect, and got involved with other different sort of genome projects. Um, and part of that was also, I became kind of an expert on what is musical taste, or one of the talking heads on that topic. And so I gave a number of talks, and it was actually through I got engaged with William Morris Endeavor
Wow.
as a composer, and somebody at WME heard about one of the talks I gave on musical taste and knew about the Pandora, and said, I wonder if you'd be interested in writing a book on the topic. And so, again, another left turn. I didn't really expect to write a book on musical taste, but I got, happily, I got a nice sort of offer that enabled me to, spend some time on it. And I actually spent almost 3 years researching and writing the book. And I decided to really make it a deep dive into what is musical taste. And part of my motivation too was to try to explain, the elements of music theory, to non-musicians. Obviously, there's a number of books that explain theory to non-musicians, but you know, I thought that there's things that I could bring that were different, but also to wrap that into this broader story of where does our taste in music come from? Why do we gravitate towards some music and not others? What does it say about us? And then ultimately, how can our love of music make our lives richer? We all know about music therapy, but even beyond, when something goes wrong, how can we activate and really take charge of our musical taste, to make our lives richer? So
So
that
why
was
do some of
my
us excuse me, so why do some of us love choral music? Not all of us are singers or conductors. They're just our audience members. They love to listen to and to go to concerts of choral music. So can you explain maybe what would be the reason for that? Or
Right. So obviously there is there are a lot of reasons why we like some music and why we don't. A lot of it does come down to what's under the hood of the music. So what's actually going on purely on a musicological level. I would say that the sonority of voices, I do think is particularly unique. I think it probably goes, when we talk about music in the brain, which I explore in the book, um, deep-seated musical memory, even musical archetypes in our mind, probably go back to the role of, you know, uh, people, our early ancestors singing around a campfire. We all know that the human voice is the only sort of natural instrument. You don't need anything. You don't need a stick. You don't need a bow. You don't need anything. It's just it comes out of the human body. I think that is one deep-seated reason why the human voice. It's why there's a million shows about who's going to be the next singing star. There's something about the beauty and the power and the communication of the human voice, and obviously when you get beautiful voices blending together, it's a beautiful sound. But I do think it has some sort of sociological and really even sort of physical impact on us. But the fact that we would gravitate to or away from choral music also comes down to our upbringing. A lot of people may not love choral music because for them they have an association to being dragged to church, right? And so they make that association, and they it was bad experience, or it just sounds like church music, even if it has nothing to do with the church, with even if it's
right.
secular. um, and so we all have our biases through our upbringing, through our culture. Some cultures, like in Scandinavia, right? All of there's where there's every little small town has obviously a very active choir. And so I think a lot of it is culture, your own upbringing. I mean, you're right. When you're in your teens and your early 20s, the music that you listen to becomes part of your your identity, and part of what's, now you begin to break off from your parents. So the music you listen to, that's why, rock and roll, or, or hip hop, or whatever it is for kids today. It's not their parents' music, it's their music as part of their identity. So these are all factors that go into, why certain music resonates with us. But you made an interesting point that once we get, in our mid-20s or 30s, we sort of, stop, discovering new music. And that really should not be. There's no reason why we won't still discover music that really moves us, and can enrich our lives, and we can find different contexts that music can be appropriate to. And it's one of the great things about services like Pandora. You can create a station, you can, create a sort of a generic choral music, or a Palestrina station, or an Eric Whitacre station, and you'll discover, a piece by Arvo Pärt that you'd never heard of before, and that takes you down the Arvo Pärt, path. So one of the reasons why we have this notion that people in their 30s and 40s stop discovering music is they have less opportunity. When you're 15 and 16, you can spend time, hours on end, just, listening to music and going to record stores, or at least when we were younger. But it comes from cultural dimensions and what I call intracultural dimensions. So one of the chapters in the book talks about the relationship between musical taste and, again, what I call intraculture. And I actually think that's one of the dominant ways in which our taste is formed. All the different clubs and the cliques and the community, the little small communities, and larger communities that we are associated with, that we have friends in them, or we subscribe to them online, or whatever it would be. All the various intracultures, those are a big part of why we think that something is worth giving a shot to, or why we would think it's okay to like, or why we would think, oh, I would never like that because it's not in our intraculture. And that can be a bias. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is we need to own our biases and recognize that just because we thought we would never, I would never program, gospel, a gospel piece, because that's not what my choir does. Well, it just might, if you just open our minds and all that. And so I think what Pandora then can do is almost like a research project. You start with what you like. So you put in some composers, Libby Larsen, or whoever it is that you like, and see what plays, because I guarantee you there's going to be some composers you've never heard of. And then you can do research on them, but then also go out, and maybe there's some Celtic choral music, or some Hungarian choral music that that you never thought you would program. So that's certainly one thing that Pandora can help.
Oh, that's wonderful. Boy, it's there's a lot of opportunities. So thank you for giving us another tool in case some of us hadn't thought about Pandora Radio for a while. Maybe we could rethink about that and head in that direction. And plus, your book sounds really fascinating. I don't know how you fit it all in, but you managed to do that. It helps to be smart. I think you're really, really smart, and it's very nice to talk to you. So once again, I thank you so much for participating in this brand new series. And
Absolutely.
Everybody, thank you for watching. Please click on subscribe and join me next time for Talking Choral Music. Thank you very much, Nolan. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you, Andrea. Great to see you. Bye-bye.
Bye. If you like this video, just click the button below to subscribe, and thanks for watching.